It's the Beaver Banter podcast. We're going over the latest in Bemidji State athletics. I'm CJ Baumgartner, joined by my co-host Ian Rivers. And if you're watching on the video feed, Ian's camera is having a little bit of technical difficulties today, but he's with us. Ian, how's it going over there?
It's pretty good, other than a Zoom update that's apparently fried my camera system on my computer. So that's always good. But we're still here. We're still going to record a podcast, and there's plenty to talk about. So let's jump into it, huh?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff to talk about, Ian. And I think we should start by first off, we had a couple of podcasts last week that we really enjoyed doing. We talked with Lucas over at Beaver territory, and then we also talked with Marcus Asmus. He was a former Augustana Viking. We chatted with him about Augie basketball ahead of the Beavers matchup against the Vikings, which we'll get to later in the podcast. But we also had the chance to talk with Lucas and just go over all the stuff Beaver territory is doing and the fun stuff that he's got going over there at beaverterritory.com. Give him a follow at Beav Territory on Twitter. So go check out those podcasts if you can. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the YouTube page for Beaver Banter. Go check all that out and see those latest podcasts. But the men's hockey, they got a nice win on Friday night and followed it up with a pretty underwhelming a game on Saturday. Ian, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought Friday it went pretty well. Everything seemed to be working for the Beavers, and I watched the highlights. I didn't get a chance to watch that game, of course, when I step away and buy my parents a Christmas present, and it's Gophers tickets. We go down to the cities and watch that game on Friday, which was incredible. But we got to miss the 4-0 win and in Bemidji, and then the next day didn't quite go as well. And I think that's we've hit the nail on the head with the inconsistencies for this hockey team all season long, and it kind of reared its ugly head again. Northern Michigan, as much as they are down in the standings this year, which I'll pull up here in a sec, they're still a consistent team. They seem to find splits every weekend in the conference, and that's what's at least keeping them afloat, trying to get back to that top four spot for Northern Michigan. Yeah, they currently sit 7 points behind the Beavers, so they haven't been great, but in the conference they are quite literally 8-8 this season. So like I said, they get points every weekend. They rarely drop, and you know what? We're 2-2 against them this year with no overtime appearances. So that speaks to the consistency of Northern Michigan to be 500, and it speaks to our inconsistency when we've got the team on the ropes, and you're at home and you come out and you skate like that. And really, it's weird because the Beavers hockey team, they come out and they'll outshoot somebody and they'll not score any of them, and then the games that they win is like a game against St. Cloud that they win 3-1 when they shot like 14 times total, and they still found three of them in the back of the net. Of course, one of those was an empty netter, but just trying to look at the shot charts here, if I could navigate a box score. But Bemidji, they wildly outshot Northern Michigan on Saturday night. And it was unfortunate because, this team, I think it showed a lot. Ross Armour coming back, which we discussed, really helped this team on Friday night. And it sucks that they couldn't follow it up with at least another point, because now we're no longer in a situation, if you look at the standings, where we can just say, yes, our fate is in our own hands. We now sit 7 points behind Mankato with only 2 games in hand. That means we cannot pass them without help. And like we've talked about, I don't know if I trust this team to go out and sweep every weekend from here to the end of the season anyways, which Mankato won't do either. But we're in a tough spot, but this next weekend's going to tell us a lot. But yeah, this weekend was the bare minimum of what you wanted from this team. 3 points, get back in the win column.
And you talk about, Ian, that shot selection and how sometimes that shot selection can be super high and then they not get anything, and then of course the shot selection being super low against St. Cloud State and then winning. Obviously a little bit of that is just sports. It's hockey. It's getting the right bounces and all that. But do you think it has anything to do with shot selection, of like just being opportunistic, not taking maybe necessarily the right shots on the ice and just slapping one across towards the goalie versus getting like an intentional, like really good shot? Or is it just kind of like been a very unlucky with the bounces?
Well, yeah, there is something to be said about that too. Shot selection is a very big thing because there's been games that I've watched the Beavers and it's like, wow, they have 42 shots on net, but how many of them have actually threatened a goalkeeper? How many of them have not been right at the goalie's chest or right into his glove, and he's really not had to move? I remember one of the Ferris State games. I was like, what are we doing? We're not challenging him at all. We're not really getting good looks. Even though we had, I think, over 40 shots in that game. But yeah, this was the first weekend I think we've really dominated the shot totals in both games. Friday night 35-18 shot totals, and Saturday night 22 for Northern Michigan, 37. So we shot 15 more times at the net, and we just couldn't find the back of it. And so that definitely hurts. But you know, I think we've come to accept this with this team. We talked about it with Lucas. The future is still very bright for this team. This was kind of a year ahead of schedule thing as it was, anyways. And I don't think that necessarily, we're right where we were picked to finish. We're fourth, so that's where we were picked to finish in the CCHA. So I guess you could say we're right on schedule, but I think with the games in hand, we still have that opportunity to climb up, and we know this team can do it. We've seen this team sweep Minnesota State on, Mankato's home ice. We've seen them split with St. Cloud. We've seen them go into Houghton, Michigan, and take 5 points out of that series with the Huskies. So this is a really good team, and they play so inconsistent that it's hard to trust them. But you know, I think this next weekend is really going to tell us a lot about this team, CJ, because we've got a game, 2 games, I should say, against Lake Superior State. They're in Sault Ste. Marie, or Sault Ste. Marie, sorry, and so you have to travel to the UP. It's damn near Canada up there, but this is a team that's currently ranked 60 in the pairwise. That is almost dead last. I believe there's only 61 teams that even get pairwise rankings. I'd have to fact check that. It's 61 or 63. It's one of those two numbers, but if you want to be serious, I had a chart drawn up, and obviously now you can't see it, but I'll go over it anyways. I'm considering the Beavers unserious and a serious threat to drop out of the top four if they take 0 or 1 point from this weekend. If you take anywhere from 2 to 4 points from this weekend, I think that the race for the top four is still very much alive. Obviously 4 points would be much better than 2 in that grouping, but you lost one of the games, that means, or both of them in overtime, and so that's still, you're still alive for that top four. And then if you take 5 or 6 points, which is what I'm hoping they need to do to stay alive for the title race, then I consider you a serious program and competing for that CCHA championship, regular season championship at the very least. So I'm hoping for 5 or 6 points, and I think it's going to tell us a lot about what this team is going to be for the 4 weekends we have after this. Because this is a team, they still play hard. It's still up in the UP. They're at home. They're going to have their fans there, but they're really not having a good season, and you have to take advantage of that if you're going to have any chance of winning, because you still got a couple of tough series left. You've got 2 home series left after this. Both of them are against the top teams in the CCHA, in my opinion, Michigan Tech and Minnesota State. And then your road series are against teams that are the teams we thought would be at the bottom in Ferris State and St. Thomas. And we've already shown that we can't really keep up with Ferris State's style of play at home. We only took 3 points from that series. So going into Big Rapids, that's going to be tough. And then to end the season, St. Thomas, a team that's still kind of hanging around, they're currently 7th in the standings, but man, they're right there. So anything can happen over these last couple of weeks, but this is going to be such a big series. You got to take points from the lower teams. We talked about it with soccer earlier this year. Football was the same way. You've got to take care of business when you play these teams at the bottom of your standings.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. It alternates. They have the series this weekend, and then they flip it over. They play Northern Michigan. Then they flip it over, and then they go play Ferris, and then they go flip it over, and then they play it alternates between these really tough opponents and these really beatable opponents. And there's nothing really I haven't said other than throughout the season other than this is another set of gimme games, and these are games where you got to get as many points as possible, like you said, to stay alive. And not only that, there's just no room for error because this team hasn't put themselves in that position. If they maybe get the wins earlier in the season against Ferris State, or maybe don't have to go to a shootout against St. Thomas or do some of that other stuff, it gives them a little bit more breathing room when they play when they play some of these teams down the stretch, but they've put themselves in a position where they're going to have to run the table a little bit here if they want to remain relevant, like you said before, with the women's soccer, with football. And Ian, do you think that the men's hockey team has it in them? Do you think that they can run the table, or do you think that they're going to get some nice wins, but also have some really tough losses that kind of keep them running in the mud from getting into where they want to be?
I think that they're going to kind of get in their own way. That's what we've seen so far this season. And, until I see otherwise, I'm not going to think that they're going to be more consistent coming down the stretch. That's what I'm obviously hoping for. That's what I've been hoping for all year. Every time we get into the last, 2 minutes of a game, it's a clench moment, even if you're up four, because you're like, gosh, what is this team going to do? So I'm going to predict, if I had to predict with 5 weeks left of the season for the Beavers, I would say they'd finish in second or third. I don't think this team has the team to quite get it done. They still have a little bit of ground to make up. But I could see them finishing second if they stay close enough. I believe on the last weekend of the season, Minnesota State plays Michigan Tech in a series. So one of those teams might end up dropping a bunch of points, and the Beavers might end up saying, "Oh, St. Thomas is down, and we had a good weekend. We got 5 points. Michigan Tech got one, and then we jumped them, or Mankato got one, and we jumped them." Something like that. So I think second or third is the realistic spot that I'm looking at. But like I said, I mean, I feel like I've said this 3 or 4 times this season already, but this is really now when you get down to the crunch time. This series with Lake Superior State is going to tell us a lot about this team and where they're headed for the remainder of the season. Bare minimum, I think for a successful season and what you say, yeah, okay, we got a lot of young offensive players, a sophomore goalie, obviously the senior defense. It's gonna stink losing those guys, but we've got some good guys coming in that can hopefully fill those shoes, and some of the younger guys have looked pretty solid. So I don't think it's going to be quite a travesty losing all those guys. Obviously, you don't want to lose three seniors that have been there, done that. But I think that we've said what we can really about the Beavers hockey team. They are who they are at this point, and that's a pretty inconsistent young offense. We see it every night. They can create those shots, but I think that speaks to the inexperience when a lot of those shots sometimes are not quite as quality as you would like.
It's the old Denny Green quote, right? They were who we thought they were, and that's pretty much been who Bemidji State has. It's why during the women's soccer season in the fall, when we said, it's tough to run the table, but we always kind of left the door open for women's soccer to do that because we said, well, they've earned kind of in recent history the pedigree to say that they're good enough to get it done. And the same thing with football. Like, it's tough, but like, hey, like and that's the thing with the young team is we haven't seen them quite do it yet. So that'll be the interesting part. Yeah, like it's been treading a lot of the same kind of beats throughout the season, but I mean a big series for them. Last thing on men's hockey, Ian, what do you think this weekend bolts for them? I think they have to get 6 of 6, and I think they will. I'm going to go out on a limb. They're going to do that.
Yeah, I think Saratori, he's going to coach up a good game plan. And, maybe we don't win the CCHA necessarily if we win this series. But I think he's going to put these guys in the best position he can to succeed. The seasons we've seen them do good. Normally there is this lull in the middle of the season and they kind of pick it back up. Last season, they kind of picked it back up towards the end of the year and made that run. And you thought, oh, we're, so close to the NCAA tournament yet again, if we could have won that championship game. And I think that this is going to be a weekend that they can definitely go out and get 2 wins, whether that's 5 or 6 points, really makes no difference to me. I think 5 is the minimum that you're looking at if you want to stay alive for that second or first spot in the CCHA. So I think they can win both of these games, regardless of whether it's regulation or overtime.
All right, let's move on to women's hockey now, and not really much to touch on other than just a tough weekend against the Golden Gophers.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much more to say about this team this year. It's been disappointing. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it that well, because the same team that we're used to. I think the thing that's stark to me is the goal difference. If we're losing games in years past, we're putting up competitive series with Minnesota. Hey, we tied them one night and then we lost 3-2 or something like that. And it's just absolutely not the case. We talked about it with Wisconsin, the like 30-4 goal goals against or whatever it is. It's been the same with Duluth. It's been the same with Minnesota. And it's been the same with Ohio State. And of course, we still have to play, or no, we don't have to play Ohio State again. But I guess this is probably the easiest stretch of the season you're going to get here to end it out. You got St. Cloud State, who's currently ranked 15th in the country, and then St. Thomas, Minnesota State, and Minnesota Duluth, who obviously most of those teams have given you trouble anyways. But I think anything you can get from this series this weekend in St. Cloud is a benefit. If you can take even 1 point to try to, because we've only got 3 points on the season. And so the only thing you're going to be able to take from this and hold your hat on is can we jump St. Thomas for that 7th spot? And they're at 7 points. We're at 3. We have obviously a weekend series coming up with them next weekend. But or 2 weekends from now, I should say. But the last time we played St. Thomas, we got swept by them. So this will be at home ice. But that weekend is going to be a little bit more important to I guess what the Beavers have to do. And then honestly, just taking anything from the last couple of weeks of the year, try to find some goal scorers that are going to work for you for the future. Maybe, see if a goaltender can step up. But ultimately, anything you can get from any one of these 8 games, and then maybe the playoffs. Obviously, they'll get the quarterfinals, regardless of who they play. It'll probably be, let's see, at this point, it's going to come down to Minnesota or Ohio State either way, depending on who wins the WCHA. We'll get the first or second place depending on where we finish. So, it's just like I said, get anything you can to hang a positive note on to end the season, because it's been, gosh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 straight losses now. And only one of those games have we scored more than 2 goals. And only once have we let in less than 4 goals. And that was against St. Thomas. So hopefully we can hang our hats on something here to end the season. But it's been a season to forget for sure for the Beavers women's hockey team.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at this season, like you said, it's disappointing. That's the word that comes to mind. And like you said, for all those things, they usually are competitive. And to be in a year where it's not just, like, hey, we got to take a little bit of a step back. You're kind of taking about 2 or 3 steps back, just to try and regroup here. And it's been tough for the women's hockey team. But hey, like you said, chance coming up against St. Cloud State to be able to do something and at least get some kind of positivity rolling into late January. All right, let's switch over to basketball now, and let's talk men's basketball first because we got some positivity there. The winning streak does come to an end in Wayne State, but they do finish off the weekend getting a W against Augustana. So they don't get the winning streak extended. They do get the split and really kind of keep even in that race for to try and stay in that top 4 of the NSIC North. Ian, what was your takeaways from the weekend?
Yeah, I think it was good. The offense, again, the inconsistency kind of reared its ugly head. 53 points only against Wayne State, and then to go out and score almost 40 more points, 36 more against Augustana. Obviously, it's 2 very different teams, but you'd like to have a little bit more consistency there. But ultimately, I think a split is about as good as we could hope for from the weekend. That's kind of what we've been hoping to predict most every weekend, just at least go out there and get a split. And then, last weekend they were able to get a sweep. And we didn't touch on that too much because we had Marcus on, but yeah, they swept last weekend. Winona State, Concordia St. Paul and Minnesota State at home, both pretty comfortable victories, an 18-point win over Concordia St. Paul and a 10-point win over Minnesota State. And then, yeah, you follow that up with an ugly 15-point loss against Wayne State. But they were able to get the split on the weekend. And I think that's what you're going to need to do here coming down. How many weekends do we have left here, CJ? Because we're coming down on it. There's 4 weekends left, I think it looks like. 8 games.
There's not a ton of time left because, yeah, once you get into February, things start to wrap up really quick. The NSIC tournament, less than a month from today, those first round games taking place in Bismarck, North Dakota this year. Looking at, they have a series upcoming at home, like you said, against Southwest Minnesota State and Sioux Falls. Then they go on the road to take on Minot UMary, and then back home for Northern State, MSU Moorhead, and then a Thursday game on the 16th of February against St. Cloud State at home, and then travel to Duluth that Saturday to finish out the season. So yeah, if I'm my math outcomes correctly, that's 8 more games left in the season for the Beavers and a chance here to still pick up some wins. I mean, you have some games against Minot and UMary that you hope you can pick up. You have a game against St. Cloud that you can hopefully pick up. I mean, there's some games on the schedule here that they should be able to at least keep pace and try and avoid kind of maybe like a late season collapse here. But I think they've played themselves in a very nice situation for the NSIC tournament.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this weekend is going to be really tough. You got Sioux Falls and SMSU, and those are both teams that are 9-5 in conference, and 13-6, 14-6 overall. So you're on the road. That's about where the Beavers are at, though. We're 8-6, they're 9-5. We're 13-7, they're 14-6 and 13-6. So we're right there with them. And this is going to be a statement weekend. I mean, everything seems like it's a statement weekend right now, but this is really, you've got 2 games versus pretty quality opponents. You know, it's not, oh, we play Augustana, who's 5-9 in the conference now, and then the other game was against a 9-5 team. No, you've got 2 teams that are both 9-5 in the conference. You know, they're in the South Division, but this is going to be a big, big weekend. If you could get a split here, I think it goes a long way as you're trying to stave off Minot State and UMary down below you. And even St. Cloud State, if they can make a run towards the end of the season. You know, we got a 4-game lead on them, 2-game lead on Minot State, and 3-game lead on UMary to try to get into the postseason. I don't know if I see the Beavers moving up from that 4 spot. It would be pretty tough, but you know, just to make that NSIC tournament would be such a big step for this basketball program that's been having a lot of down seasons lately. I remember, what was it, a couple of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago now, they had a decent year, but it wasn't necessarily anything like this where you really thought, wow, this team is actually cooking. You know, they're playing with house money right now. They're playing really well. So I really like where this team is headed, and you know, so many times I talk about the rebounding, and this weekend it wasn't really the rebounding. It was 2 really close rebounding games. Conveniently enough, my rebounding did stay true to form. Bemidji State lost the rebounding battle by 1 against Wayne State, and they lost. 1 rebound makes up for 15 points. You know, obviously that makes a lot of sense. No, but they did lose the rebounding battle, and they lost the game. And then against Augustana, they won the rebounding battle by 1. And I guess that helped them win the close game. But it was really the shooting this weekend. The 21%, 1 of 8 from 3-point range for the Beavers in that first game. And then only 40% from the field. That's part of why your team lost that game. You can't shoot that low from either stripe like that. And then such a stark contrast, 53%, 11 of 18 shooting. Or 16 of 30. I'm looking at the first half stats only.
Yeah,
Gosh,
11 for 18 in the first half is
in the first
pretty
half
darn
is
good.
insane. 61%. So 16 of 30 overall. And then, I'm sorry, 4 of 19, not 1 of 8 on Friday night. So really stark contrasts in the shooting this weekend. And hopefully against 2 quality opponents, they're going to need those results. They're going to need shooting this weekend. And did I say those games were on the road? I think those games
They're
are
at the
home
BSU
now that I'm
gymnasium.
looking at that. So that is a benefit. That is a very, very big benefit. You know, hopefully people are supporting the team. Hockey's not at home this weekend. Neither is women's hockey. So not much else to watch. If you're up there in Bemidji, I would suggest you get out and support that men's basketball team, because this could be a huge weekend against 2 pretty quality opponents.
Yeah, I mean, 2 quality opponents, and not just like quality opponents, but I think there's maybe I'm kind of off on this one, but it's similar teams record wise. So teams that are kind of at about your skill level. Now, I can't say for certain if they quite match up the same, but just to have 2 teams in that skill level, it's almost more of a prove it game than you take on a team that's far and away better than you, because yeah, you want to try and win and you want to try and make a statement, but at the same time, if you lose, everybody goes, well, they were the better team. You should have, you were expected to lose. Oh, well, you fought hard. When it's a team like the 2 that they're playing this weekend, these are, hey, these guys are good, but you should expect to beat them, or at least you should, like, there's no like, shucks, you tried. Like, they're close enough where it's a prove it game, because we're now taking this team seriously enough that we're expecting you to go in a big series at home and get at least 1 win, hopefully 2. Like, that's where they've raised the bar on themselves. So they've raised the bar on themselves, and that's where they're at in this spot in the season. It's a credit to them, And now they need to keep building on that. So it's going to be really interesting what they do. I think one of the unsung heroes who we haven't talked about enough on this podcast has been John Sutherland for Bemidji State, transfer from UMD, excuse me, a couple of years ago from Grand Rapids, and has just meant a lot to this team this year. Another double in both games over the weekend. So, I mean, he's just been a production machine for this Beavers team, and is pretty much, along with a couple other guys, been kind of the guy that keeps things moving for the Beavers.
Yeah, he's been a very focal point for this team, a very good two-way player. He gets a lot of rebounds and scores a lot of points. So he does a little bit of everything for the offense and the defense. Um, but yeah, even more of an emphasis on these games. I just looked ahead at the schedule. We have 8 games left this season, and coming up, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because obviously we want to focus on this weekend. But February 10th and 11th, the second to last weekend of the series, you've got Northern State and MSU Moorhead, and that is 2 of the top 3 teams in the North Division. Actually, that's the top 2 teams in the North Division right now. And then to close it out, you got St. Cloud State, a team that's already beaten you this year. Of course, this one will be at home, and then Minnesota Duluth, the third place team from the North. So you've got a lot of quality games coming up here. So I think that stresses even more how important getting one of these 2, if not maybe both of them, if you want to make sure. I haven't looked at Minot State's schedule, but maybe that's something we can do closer to the end of the season to see really how difficult it's going to be for them. But I think getting one, if not both of these games is going to be super important to this team if they really want to have a shot to guarantee themselves a spot. Otherwise, you're going to leave it down to the end of the season. And those last 4 games, Northern State, MSUM, St. Cloud, and Minnesota Duluth, it's going to be tough if you need to win, 2 out of 4 of those coming down to the end of the season to get in. So I would hope that we can get at least 1, if not 2, from this weekend and really solidify our spot in the top 4.
Yeah, it's a big deal to try and get into that to try and stay in that top 4. And like you said, can't really going to be tough to make a big jump in the standings, but still important just in finishing the year and getting some confidence in getting back into that tournament and trying to do the things that they want to do and the position that they've put themselves in. Again, I can't necessarily told you that I expected the men's basketball team to be in the position they're in right now. And that's a testament to them. They've played hard. They've put themselves in a good spot. There's some things they have to clean up, obviously, a little bit more consistent on the shooting end, like Ian has mentioned, trying to really put an emphasis on the rebound battle. But they're still, I mean, they're in a really good spot. And I think right now they're playing with a little bit of house money in that nobody expected them really to be in this spot. So, hey, more power to them. So now let's talk a little bit about women's basketball. Over the weekend, they had a couple games that both didn't turn out to be incredibly close
They had
against.
a couple of stinkers, man.
Yeah, it's been tough. I mean, Trinity Yoder got 19 points in the game against Wayne State. So like that's a nice feather in her cap. But then, the game against Augustana only scored 7. I believe only 1 Beaver got into double figures in that
Well,
second matchup
they
against
only
Augustana.
took that 19 and doubled it, and that was the whole team score, 38-82. Oh, I remember looking at this 2 weeks ago. Like we said, we didn't get a chance to touch on it, but they got a split the weekend before. They won against Concordia St. Paul on Friday night, and I'm like, oh, cool. They at least got a split this
A
weekend.
nice
And
little comeback win for them against the Golden Bears too. They were down double
yeah,
digits at halftime.
exactly. And so you're like, oh, cool. Maybe this team is starting to do that thing where we were hoping they would turn a corner and at least have a positive new year and kind of turn it around. But, the last 3 games, 48-90 against Minnesota State, 16-point loss against Wayne State, and then getting over doubled up in the game against Augustana, 38-82. That's just not what you want to do going into the end of the year here. I don't know that the women's team is going to be able to climb their way out of the cellar of the NSIC North. They're 3 games behind Minot State with only 8 games to go. They do have a winnable game against Sioux Falls this weekend. It's the Saturday evening game at 5:30. So it's absolutely doable, so I think they should hopefully take that game if they really are going to be serious about at least having something positive to hang their hat on. that's going to be a game you want to win. SMSU's having a decent year. They're hovering a couple games above 500, but Bemidji State hopefully can get something going to hang their hat on, um, because you want to wash the taste out of your mouth a little bit when you lose by whatever that was, 44 points. So
Yeah, I mean, just finding some kind of consistency with the offense would be a nice little step too. I mean, you can't score 38 points in a Division II college basketball game and expect to win. So, I mean, they're gonna have to figure out something there, and just trying to figure out that offense and getting the consistency in what they want to do is going to be key for them going forward. So, Ian, anything else with girls basketball? Anything else you wanted to mention going in to this weekend? Do you think that they get a split as they play the Mustangs and the Cougars? Do you think there's anything? Do you think there's anything there for them?
well, yeah, you can definitely take this game against USF. That's going to be a more winnable game. But I'm looking at the schedule here. You worked the basketball games when we were in school, CJ, and I'm just now noticing that the men's games will be played before the women's games this weekend. Is that something that they alternate? Because I noticed that was the same thing for last weekend's games, and the weekend before it was the men playing later than the women. So is that something they've always alternated? I always just kind of assumed that the women's games were not to be rude to the women's basketball teams, but I thought that those were just the ones that were always played first.
Yeah, I mean, typically they were played first. I can't really remember a scenario in which the women's games were played second, at least in my time there. So it's only about 3.5 years I was doing that, so I can't speak for the entire time. But yeah, according to my memory, I don't know. I don't know what the cause and the change would be. I don't know, other than just to
Yeah,
shake it
because
up or
Friday night is 7:30 start time for Southwest Minnesota State for the women, and then 5:30 for the men, 3:30 on Saturday for the men, and 5:30 for the women. So it appears that they've somewhat changed their scheduling. It seems like it alternates, kind of every other weekend, who gets to play first, who has to play last, or, I don't. Maybe it's a better thing to play first, or last, I should say, for the women. Get more fans in the gym. From the men's game, that might come out and just say, "Hey, men's team just won. We're optimistic. Why not stay for the women too?"
right, exactly. And I've seen some of those games. Now, when I was taking stats in some of those, both teams weren't particularly strong. The men's basketball team is a little bit better comparative in the standings to where the women's basketball team was, but both teams weren't at a high competitive level compared to
Yeah,
the
you're
higher
comparing
parts of
like
NSIC basketball. But like,
sixth place to seventh or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
and like so the men's games just like the guys can jump a little bit higher. I mean, they can dunk, they can do a little bit more stuff physically. So like those games tended to get a little bit more energy just because the players can move up and down the floor a little bit faster. But I mean, so like that would be one thing, is like maybe that sets the energy early. Maybe they just try and do it to, yeah, like you said, accommodate and give each person a spotlight. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I always would prefer, by the way, like I would, if I this I've never played uh anything beyond really competitive basketball, like at all in my life. But I feel like if I was going to play, I'd almost want that first game just to be the ones to get in and do there, and then you're not sitting around in the gym and like waiting for that stuff to happen. But I don't know, that's just me. So like when I like the Saturday games or like day games, because they're like in the middle of the afternoon, I would have almost preferred that.
Yeah, I think it give and take. It's nice to be able to unwind. It depends on what you're going. Like I played high school basketball, so you get that extra time after school to game plan and watch a little bit extra tape and that sort of thing. But I think it could go either way. So just an interesting fact that I just now noticed as I was looking over the schedule.
Beavers have a big series this weekend, and we'll talk about it next week on the Beaver Banter podcast. We'll see you guys then.